The Movers with me, Sinead Gillett, and my charming co-host, Philip Macartney. Phil, are we getting straight into today's podcast, or do you want to talk about your week?
I don't want to talk about my week at all. Let's go straight in, no kissing. Let's get at it.
Never. Okay, what are we talking about this week?
So do you know what? This week is a busman's holiday for us. We are going to talk about taxi, our bread and butter. Our bread and butter, taxis. We're going to talk about two things. Like, Sinead, we're often accused of being too serious. Actually, we're never accused of being too serious. But anyway, so we want to do not just the story of taxi, where you can flex your intellectual muscles, Sinead, but also some fun taxi stories as well, because there are an awful lot of them out there. And yeah, I think we do both, and we'll try and weave it all together. Ultimately, I'd love to give people a view of taxi, because it's always seen as such a utility. People jump in and jump out of taxis, but no one goes as far as thinking, what's taxi about? Where's it coming from? Where's it come from? Where's it going to? And also bring those fun stories, because I can guarantee you, everybody out there has a fun or a weird or a strange taxi story.
Yes.
Everybody.
I think everybody has a good, bad and ugly taxi experience, right? And everyone has pretty much used a taxi for different reasons. Some people use them very often. Other people only use them every now and then. But there are good ones. There are bad ones. And there's some really ugly ones too. So we take that as our structure.
Let's start.
And see where we go.
Let's start.
Okay.
Let's go with good, bad, and ugly. Okay, you go first. Give me a taxi experience that you've had.
A good one. I would count myself particularly lucky in terms of good taxi experiences, because as part of my job, I get to go out and meet taxi companies quite a lot. And I'm on the marketing side of the business. So I get sent out when everything is extremely rosy and everyone's really, really happy and is greeting me with lunches and tea cakes, and it's a very friendly atmosphere. And I get to go out and chat to the drivers in the cars too. What happens is I'll go and chat to a fleet manager, fleet owner. How's everything going? Tickety boo, chat, all good. Can I go out and talk to one of your drivers? Absolutely. Can you give me one of your friendly drivers who's going to talk to me? So they usually pick the driver that is somehow a bit of a superstar in the fleet, the one that goes the extra mile, that likes to bring people around and be a bit of tour guide too. So my favorite taxi story, and I went back to try and find this because this actually turns out to be quite a long time ago. It was 5 years ago. I was in Sheffield. As you know, we have an office in Sheffield, and it was the hottest summer on record in the UK. And I looked at the photograph and I was like, Jesus, it was hot. And that reminded me of why I was taking the taxi in the first place. Turns out I was actually with you, Phil, right? So we were at one of your roadshow things the day before. You flipped off back to Dublin and I stayed an extra night to do something else there. And the day that I was leaving, the rail service in the UK shut down because the tracks were melting because of these record temperatures. So I couldn't get the train from Sheffield to Manchester Airport. And City Taxis, who I was with, said, no, we'll get you a taxi. And we're going to give you our star driver, Kabir. Kabir brought me on that gorgeous drive from Sheffield to Manchester across the Peak District. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I have done that before. It's gorgeous. It's really, really nice.
So scenic. And he was lovely and chatty and showing me a few things. And then he said, look, this is fixed rate here. So you have an extra half an hour. Will I just drive you up here to show you the most beautiful view in the whole of the county? I said, absolutely, yes. So we did that. I got these gorgeous photographs, lovely little walks around in some kind of woodland areas. And then he said, you must need an ice cream. So he drove me down to this lake and bought me a 99. And the two of us sat there enjoying our ice cream together on this sunny day before bringing me gently to the airport. And I just got on the plane, just perfectly content with my taxi journey. That is customer service.
Beautiful.
He bought me the ice cream.
That is customer service. So I had no, it's not a similar experience, and it's not customer service as you'd want it, but it was definitely a taxi experience. So I'm in Rio de Janeiro. Linda, my wife, was working over there at the World Cup, and I just bummed along because there was a free room. And I'll admit it, I was pretty hungover, and I was going to a place in Rio called Fogo de Chão, which is a big, effectively a big meat palace. It's just a place to go and eat as much steak as possible. And I was thinking, okay, that's where I'll go. And I hailed a cab on the main strip at the beach, and I was like, hey, Fogo de Chão. And I did it in my best Brazilian/Portuguese accent. And my taxi driver nodded, get in, get in. Then we realized, and I realized, I have not one iota of Portuguese other than hello and take me to the steak place. So now I'm sat with this guy and I've literally no way to converse with him. And he turns round and he has no English really. And he said his name's Marcel. So I was like, cool. Hi, Marcel. Marcel. And he starts saying good. He's still like he's holding his hands up like he's holding a pair of watermelons and saying in a questioning way, good, good. And I'm like, yeah, I am fucking good. Like, okay, where are we going? He then, and so when you come off the main strip, the right beside the beach is 3-4 lanes. But whenever you go off into the middle of Rio to get to the other side of Rio where this was, it's really narrow, quite narrow streets, and the traffic is insane. This guy does not care. He is up every car's ass, blasting the horn, and then turning around to me and laughing his ass off. Then every single woman that was remotely attractive, he not only so he would signal to me. He was like, he points at the woman, and I'm like, okay. Bear in mind, I'm hungover. It's 30 degrees. And he's like, hey. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, very pretty. And he goes, yes. And next thing, he's out the window, lets go of the steering wheel, and starts gesturing. And I'm not joking, to 10 women the whole way down the street, every single one blasting the horn. And the more he's doing it, they're not looking at him. They're looking at me like I'm telling him to do this stuff. Eventually, I just went with it and laughed, and he got me to the place, and he told me I was his friend and that I should come visit him.
There's a bit
But
of a theme
didn't.
starting on your
No, hold
stories in
on.
these
There is, and I knew you would say that. I knew you would say that.
Here's a story about me that I'm not a creep in this story, but yet when you put them all together, there's quite a lot
there was a bit of
stories.
creepiness there. It was Marcel was the creep. It was Marcel. But it was just one of those, and I remember actually putting it on social media, and it was a photo of him gesturing to me, and I said, here's Marcel, after he got excited over seeing a perfectly pert bottom or something like this. And I remember, like, Linda and I were laughing, and I was like, how often do I'd say in social media, there's a ton of taxi stories from everyone. Like, everyone's had that one taxi experience, good or bad or ugly.
Yeah, well, bad stories happen quite a lot. Taxi driver was smoking, smelly car, really loud music, yapping on the phone, or driving badly, all those kind of things. We've all had that. My worst taxi driver story is we were traveling, myself and my friend Swaz, we're traveling, I think we were going from Peru into Ecuador. So we were in a border town, got off one of those buses, those kind of overnight buses, and we're swamped by people. Taxi driver comes along, saves the day, hero in the back of the car, drives around to a quieter part of town. We're like, oh, that was hectic, wasn't it? Stops the car. Another fella gets in on the passenger side. And I think anyone who's ever been in a taxi where the taxi driver stops and someone else gets in the passenger side is about to be robbed. So we were like, shit. Anyway, pulls us around the back of the building, gets us out of the car with a friend. And to be fair, it was a pretty benign robbery. Like he kind of showed us a gun more so than brandished a gun, and we just handed over our dollars, and then we that was the end of that. We have put our backpacks on and off we went on our merry way.
Yeah, I mean, it was a fairly benign robbery. Like,
It
I mean,
was.
I know you want a dramatic one, but like,
it was kind of non-threatening-ish. So it did happen. That happened again another time, not with a gun though, but again, the driver stops, the pal jumps in, and it's like, hand over your money, girls. That was somewhere else, though. I can't remember where that was. So basically, I don't know, just as soon as the car stops and someone else gets in the other side of the car, you're in trouble. Watch out for that, guys.
See, God bless regulation. And we'll get into the history of it a little bit when regulation came in and stuff. But the only remarkably bad journey I had was actually more due to my friends than the driver. It was one of these things where I was living in Dublin, and every time I came back to my hometown of Bangor, my friends had developed new fun ways to amuse themselves on nights out. And this particular fun game was with one particular driver. They would just cover his eyes while he was driving and tell him when to brake. But the driver would be like, well, it's their problem. And I was like, no, you're not meant to acquiesce to this behavior. You're the adult in the car. And he was like, they haven't seen me wrong yet. And I'm sitting there crapping myself. And my buddies are just giggling, going, we make him brake as late as possible. So we're going into roundabouts, and you're like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Highly dangerous. Please don't report my friends to the police.
That's a nightmare for drivers. Come here, in preparation for this podcast, as in last night, I threw out a WhatsApp message to a couple of people I know, drivers and fleet owners, to see did they have any stories to share with us that might fit into this good, bad or ugly structure. And I got this one from Phil Hamilton, who you do know from Belfast.
Phil, of course.
Well, Sinead, one time I had to pick up this girl, and when I got there, she had a baby, and she was dressed in an air hostess's outfit. So I'm helping her in, get her all in, and then I turn around and says to her, whereabouts are we going? Are we going to the airport? Or she then turned around and says, no, I don't work in the airport. I'm not an air hostess. I'm a stripper. So she says, could you do me a favour? And I says, what? And she says, would you be able to come in with me? Now, bear in mind, we have a baby in the car who's sleeping, and make sure that none of the guys get a wee bit frisky. So we got to the venue, we got up, she goes in, strips off. I'm watching it, plus I'm getting paid. And the next thing is we come out, baby's dead on, thing like that, and we're heading on down. And she's in the front of the taxi, and she says to me, you don't mind if I get dressed, because I'm going to my mum's. So we're at the roundabout in Belfast, and she starts putting her jeans on, and obviously she has this air hostess outfit, and she's pulling up, and this lorry driver near crashes right into me. Everyone was beeping, everyone's seen it, and what I had to do when I got home, I had to tell Claire everything, just in case she thought I was up to something. So that's my wee interesting story.
Wow, Phil.
So just in case you're not sure, that's in the good stories there. He said to me afterwards that he got a fare, a tip, and a striptease, even though his car got damaged.
I just want to slow clap him. Do you know what? And he never addressed where the baby was while the strip was going on. He was just like, the baby was fine. Where did you leave the baby, Phil?
He also said that a couple of months later, he was walking around and he bumped into the lady in question with his wife, Claire. And it turns out that she went to school with Claire.
Not only a taxi story, a Northern Ireland story, if ever I've heard one.
There are some funny things that people leave behind in taxis. When I used to go out visiting fleets, I still do go out and visit fleets. I haven't really asked this question in a while, but I used to always be fascinated by saying, can I have a look at your lost and found and let me see the pile of stuff? And they let me go through it and I'd go, what is that? But whenever I ask fleets, what are the weirdest things that have been found in your taxis, there was always quite some common themes there. So they nearly always said a baby, right? Like a real baby. All had a story of a baby being left in their taxis. Drugs, sex toys. And then the most common thing that they always went to was things like fake legs, glass eyes, that kind of stuff. And last night, one person told me their funniest thing was Paula Radcliffe's BBC Sports Personality of the Year award.
No way.
Shows how much she valued that.
Give a shit about that. Jeez, Paula. That's fairly tight. So we've done good. We've done bad. Shinners, do you have anything ugly to tell us about the taxi industry?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I have a kind of a horrible one. And maybe before I talk about the ugly one, we might just also remember that a lot of taxi drivers have done very heroic things. We often refer to the taxi industry as the fourth emergency services, and there's loads of taxi heroes out there. And I love when I see those stories in the newspapers of a taxi driver going above and beyond to rescue someone in the snow or get medicine to somebody. And in COVID, we had lots and lots of taxi heroes. So there are many taxi heroes out there, but there are also some really bad taxi zeros out there too. And the worst story that I've come across, and I spoke to John Gardner, who you know from Take Me about this recently, was the story of Chris Halliwell, who was a taxi driver, former taxi driver, now behind bars in Swindon. And he basically took advantage of his position as a taxi driver, and he, unfortunately for the families involved, committed 2 murders while in that role, and probably suspected of doing a couple more than that. So that's something on the very, 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 very dark scale, and I'm only mentioning it because it's pretty ugly. For the families, obviously, it was devastating. for the taxi fleet itself. He was with one taxi firm, and 3 days before he got arrested, he actually moved taxi firm to a company called Five Star. And it was with Five Star that he was then arrested. The police came to speak to them, and actually they had this big stakeout going. They were searching for him for a big investigation, and the guys there were able to very quickly just go, we know how to find him, and they were able to get him on the GPS and the app, and he got arrested. Unfortunately for Five Star, you really can't come back from something like that. So that firm it just died. It basically went to the wall, and it was closed in about 4 weeks. So that is the ugly, ugly side. But remember the heroes too.
Don't forget, folks, Sinead is available for children's parties. Okay, let's do a little bit of serious, and then we'll wrap up with some stories as well, because it's not really serious. I guess it's just the history of taxi, because we were saying that just before we went on, like, there's about 3 or 4 key points in the history of taxi, isn't there? Like, there's not lots of key dates here. I mean, horse-drawn carriages were 1605 or something like that. I mean, it was a long time ago. That was kind of the first sort of taxis, wasn't it?
You could be strict on this and kind of go with the etymology of taxi meter cab, which is where it started. And that relates back to when, first of all, horse and carts had a taxi meter installed on them, and that's about 1897 or something like that. So yes, you have hackneys in London and horse and drawn carts in Paris way back in the 1700s, which people were paying to take private rides on. But the actual taxi cab itself is early 20th century when it starts to be used in vehicles. And that's down to this little bit of technology that was able to measure distance and time and then charge a fee to the passenger.
Yeah, that was 1907. And that was both London and New York, 2 big cities in the world at that stage. Okay, so that was the first taxi meter, effectively. The Yellow Cab Company was founded in Chicago in 1915. Now, I know what you're going to say. Don't jump all over me. There were yellow taxis in New York before that, but the Yellow Cab Company kind of standardized it, that iconic sort of yellow taxi thing. And I guess the embryonic beginnings of what we do, Shin, really started with the two-way radios. Like, that was kind of the start of it, wasn't it? That instead of just hailing a cab, you could order a cab and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's what we've loads of customers now still called something radio cars, radio cabs. That remains in history. The reason that is as well is that a lot of the taxi fleets, certainly in our customer base, they're really deep rooted in their local areas. A lot of family businesses there. One of our customers in Australia, actually, their family business dates all the way back to pre-automobile taxi. They have a cart carriage thing in their office, underneath their office, which goes all the way back. Like, that company has been going for over 120 years. And that just gives you that legacy that's there. And a lot of these family businesses have just stuck into their communities and they've stayed in there and they've gone with it. The radio thing, we had these TY students, that means transition year students, in with us recently. They are like about 15 or 16 and they're taken basically on a holiday for a year from school, doing all sorts of silly things like coming in and working with us. And I was trying to explain to them what taxi was like before software like iCabbi. And I was explaining to them about radios. And the way I explained it was how I remember radios back when I was, what age was I, 16 onwards, that kind of thing. And you would be in the back of a taxi and you'd hear the radio coming through and it'd be like, big party down here on Offington Place there, pick up at number da-da-da. And there's going to be there's a big crowd there, or there's a few heading that direction. And you'd say to your friend, that's a party in so-and-so's gaff. Come on, we'll go down there too. So no GDPR for the old radio taxis. Literally could get you on the scent of a party. But that's what it was like. It's so different, obviously, to what we experience today.
Yet it still forms the basis of dispatch getting an order going out to driver accepting the trip. It's just the technology has changed, but you're right. There was no privacy. Driver 21, can you do this? That's all I remember for it. But also the regulations, because so that all started. And then, of course, as with anything, it was the Wild West for a while. And then the regulations started coming in the 50s and 60s. That probably coincided with much heavier laws on drink driving as well. In the 40s, because everyone was at war and it was sort of crazy, whilst it was illegal to drink and drive, I don't think it was as policed as heavily as you get into the 60s and 70s and stuff, where it actually started to become properly applied, although not really in Northern Ireland, in fairness. That's at the same time actual regulations started to come into the taxi industry. And that, of course, again shaped what a taxi looks like, what they have to do. Effectively, the SLAs of what formed taxi today.
The regulation, very necessary and very welcome. Some opinions on the taxi industry is a bit grubby, a bit grimy, some dodgy stuff going on there. And it's certainly coming in through like the 90s and onwards. We needed to see that regulation coming in. We all know stories of those, the hardware in the car and the taximeter displaying a price. So the double foot pedal thing where a tourist gets in and they hit the foot on the on the pedal for like, charge the shit out of this American dude or whatever like that. And that stuff is all terrible and really bad. Great for the individual taxi driver who's making 3 times his fare, but really bad for the overall positioning of the city tourism into new markets. So that stuff needed to change. In all, I've seen that happen in lots of countries. That's happened to me in few places as well.
And it's those bookie stories that probably accelerated that then and said, look, we need to do something. But you're right, it was regulated globally very, very quickly. The Movers podcast is brought to you by iCabbi, the world's most powerful dispatch platform. Do you know what's actually hilarious? Because I was obviously doing a bit of research on this. Computerized dispatch started in the 80s. And I know you're a young pup, Sinead. I know you can barely remember the 80s. I remember the 80s really well. I had a BBC B computer in the 80s. These things were not slick. These things, you had to be a coder just to use like the word processing the document creator, whatever on them. How the hell did they do computerized dispatch in the 80s? That must have been insane. It must have looked like war games or something like that, like the big spinning wheels and all the rest of it. Have you ever seen anything from that era?
So maybe it wasn't the 80s, but we did have an Amstrad, which I'm guessing was must have been early 90s. And we had this manual like the size of a telephone book, which maybe about 15 pages showed you how to program it to be a calculator. It's impossible.
But how
it kept us busy now, mind you.
But we know how complex dispatch is now. And I mean, if you look at iCabbi, it's hundreds and hundreds of different settings and tons of data, all live and all doing these amazing things. How in the hell did they, one, afford a computerized dispatch system? Like that just must have been insane in terms of cost. But I cannot see what that looked like in the 80s. That's crazy.
Can't remember who said this, but there's that famous quote that, look at what computers can do now. Imagine in 10, 20 years' time, they're going to be 1,000 times more powerful and 1,000 times bigger than they are today. I don't know who said that. There's a bit of an artifact in some of the taxi businesses that I go out to visit now, which is that they had these huge servers, like big rooms that needed to be controlled with all of this hardware, all of these servers in place. And so they had to facilitate that. And that was what these computers were based off. So there is a legacy in some of these buildings that I go to see where they're either empty now. And I know when I joined iCabbi, which is about 7 years ago, I think I missed out on one of the best parts of iCabbi marketing, which is before my time. iCabbi came and disrupted the market and brought the first cloud-based software into the industry. So everything could be done on a single laptop, no need for big servers anymore. And there was a huge amount of crack had as the disruptors in the industry with the marketing, the small former marketing team going around taking photographs of new customers from iCabbi who'd come over from the incumbent and these big skips outside their bases and all of this hardware just being fucked into the skip. And that just would have been brilliant.
And I guess, just to finish off really the history of it, it really then sort of flows through into the ride hail, the Ubers and Lyfts coming in, and maybe mobile apps as well. Those sort of all came within a relatively short space of each other, right? Like effectively the iPhone changed how we work and how we can pay for things. And then from that, the ride shares came along, ride hails came along straight after, right?
And you can look at it two ways. Like one way, lots of evidence to this. You could point to say the ride hail has been the death of the taxi industry in some instances. I mean, it absolutely came in, transformed how people get about and really disrupted the taxi industry. The flip side to that is that it made the taxi industry really professionalize and take on a lot of new technology and new business models as well. So there's kind of a glass half full, glass half empty attitude to that. Competition can and is a very, very good thing. So I've seen a lot of fleets who've been able to fight back to that and really create rigorous businesses off the back of it. The other side is market-based. So in the States, for example, it really, really ripped through a lot of the fleets over there. A lot of those businesses were either put out of business or they had to very quickly adapt. And so what we've seen there is a big shift in the type of work that traditional taxi fleets in America did. A lot of diversification over there. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, but you needed to be on your toes there if you wanted to survive, particularly back in the 2010 to 15 kind of period.
And I guess the last bit is electrification. So you've got that. And now we're sort of looking at larger EV fleets and EV fleets coming in. But I want to stop there for a second. And can I be really greedy and tell you one more taxi story? But this is from the point of view of the driver. Now, I'm not
Please
going to
do.
tell it. I'm not going to tell it like Phil Hamilton, but this one was there was a book that was released. And actually, it was released with a bit of fanfare back when I was living in Dublin. I'm going to say 2004. And I think the title of the book was Tales from the Front Seat. But this story just stood out to me because I thought it was hilarious. So, Dublin taxi driver picks up an American passenger from Dublin Airport. And the guy gets in and he's got big 10-gallon hat, big burly Texan. And he gets in and of course he's got the most sort of Texan name. My name's J.D. Ballinger or something like this. And he's overt and he's a big charisma sort of guy and he gets in. And so he asks to go to one of the big hotels in Dublin, the Westbury, I think it was. They're driving into town. So that trip would maybe take half an hour, 40 minutes. And this guy said, I'm a private investigator and I've been hired by this family I'm just going into the voice. I've been hired by this family to find their daughter who's lost in Dublin. He goes into this huge story and the taxi driver's right and he goes, listen, I'm going to need someone to get me around. Can I pay you like €150 a day and you can take me around to the places where I need to find this girl? So the taxi driver's like, yeah. And he goes, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get showered, I'm going to have a little bit of a rest. Come back for me at whatever it was, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock at night. So the taxi driver's like, yeah, grand. Here's my number. He shoots off. He comes back for the guy. Again, the guy's talking about this woman's family, giving the guy like a lot of detail. And the taxi driver's like, okay. And he goes, okay, where would she be? Okay, let's go look here. Let's go look here. And he goes, no, she must have gone like she had a drug problem. Maybe she's gone to sell her body. Where would she be there? So the taxi driver's like, okay, so the prostitutes hang out in these places. And he goes, well, let's go there. So he pulls up to where the street prostitutes are. The guy goes out there and he's out there for a while. He comes back to the car and says, I think this girl has information for me. I'm going to bring her back to the hotel and I'm going to question her there. So the whole thing was just to get himself a prostitute, but he invented this massive story. I was just like, what an absolute legend. That is so good. So to finish off, Shin, it's kind of both our jobs, I guess, to figure out where the taxi industry is going and to help our customers be at the forefront of what taxi can be, etc. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts. What's happening in taxi right now, and where's it pointing to as the future for taxi?
The diversification piece is huge. We had our vision, which we kind of came into about 5 years ago, taxi companies at the center of mobility, which essentially meant taxi companies taking a stronger presence in all aspects of transportation in their cities. So getting involved in new business models, deliveries, contract work, micro transit shuttles, all that kind of stuff. That was really expedited by COVID because we saw taxi companies very quickly having to adapt to having no trips coming in and finding work and also assisting in different ways like that. So diversity, I think, is a big, big thing. We've talked before about non-emergency medical transportation in the USA, huge trend towards that. Aging population, kind of unhealthy as well if you look at the statistics too. So that's only going up. Student transportation is another area, contracts, deliveries, all that kind of stuff. So diversification is massive. Most fleets we know do something other than traditional taxi work at this point. Probably going to have to rebrand, I think, at some point in order to accommodate that. That's one big trend. You heard it here first. No, maybe not. That's one big trend. Consolidation. You see that in the UK market. Companies like Vizu and Take Me, this rise of the super fleet or groups of fleets working together. You see that in the States as well. Z-Trip. Collaboration. Collaboration is really where the industry needs to move quickly to. And the bit that I'm most excited about, in the UK, iCabbi has the Taxi Alliance, which unites taxi fleets with common goals as well as with shares in the iCabbi software, blah, 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 blah. But really, it's about the industry working together. So years ago, you might have these local fleets who are like really competitive with each other, almost in the same way that you might have two football teams in a town and they're viciously competitive. Local fleets not really getting on with each other. So it was this all for one attitude, I guess, in the taxi industry. And we're now moving towards this one for all vision of a taxi community where everybody can share work with each other and keep the work within the taxi industry rather than letting it leak out into the ride hail players. That's something I'm quite excited about. And I think there's a real future for the industry if we go in that direction.
I think that is a brilliant place to end on, because that is, for me, the single most important part for taxi. Bound together, focus on a brilliant experience for the passengers, and kick the butt out of ride hail.
Okay, taxi, get me out of here.
Brilliant, Shin. That is it from me. Don't forget to subscribe, please.
See you soon.